The tomato soup was still boiling when Brandon lifted the pot from the stove. Naomi looked up from her phone just in time to see her husband of 7 years tilt the container over her head. The scalding liquid hit her scalp first. Pain exploded across her skin as the soup cascaded down her face, soaking into her hair, her clothes, pooling on the kitchen floor around her chair. She screamed and jumped up, knocking the chair backward. Her hands flew to her head, trying to wipe away the burning liquid, but it only spread the heat across her palms. "Brandon, what are you? You have 10 minutes to get out of my house," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. He set the empty pot on the counter and crossed his arms. 10 minutes, Naomi. Not 11. Not 15. 10. She stared at him through soup-blurred vision, her scalp screaming with pain. "What are you talking about? This is our house. We bought this together. 9 minutes now." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This couldn't be real. She'd come home from work 20 minutes ago to find Brandon making dinner like it was a normal Tuesday evening. They'd exchanged pleasantries about their days. He'd smiled at her. And now he was standing in their kitchen with his arms crossed while soup dripped from her chin onto the tile floor. "Brandon, please just tell me what's happening." 8 minutes. "You're wasting time." Something in his eyes made her believe him. There was no anger there, no rage, nothing that explained what he'd just done. Just cold determination. She'd never seen that expression on his face before, not in 7 years of marriage, not in the 2 years they'd dated before that. Her instincts kicked in. She ran toward the stairs, her soup-soaked shoes leaving wet prints on the hardwood. Her scalp throbbed with every step, but adrenaline pushed her forward. She burst into their bedroom and grabbed her largest purse, dumping its contents onto the bed. Her hands shook as she stuffed in her laptop, her passport, her birth certificate from the filing cabinet. She grabbed a handful of clothes from her closet without looking at what they were. 5 minutes. Brandon's voice drifted up from downstairs. Where would she even go? Her parents lived 3 states away. Her sister was on a business trip in Europe. Most of her friends were actually Brandon's friends from college who she'd adopted as her own over the years. She snatched her jewelry box from the dresser, the one with her grandmother's ring and the pearl necklace from her mother. Her phone charger. Her toiletries from the bathroom. She moved like a robot, grabbing items without thinking, operating on pure survival instinct. The photo albums. She couldn't leave those. She pulled them from the bookshelf in the hallway, pressed them against her chest as she stumbled back down the stairs. Brandon stood at the bottom, checking his watch. 2 minutes. "Can I at least know why?" Her voice cracked. "Can you tell me what I did?" He looked at her, then really looked at her, and something flickered in his expression. For half a second she thought he might explain, might apologize, might laugh and say this was some horrible joke. But then his face hardened again. 1 minute. She pushed past him toward the front door, her arms full of her hastily grabbed belongings. Her car keys. Where were her car keys? She patted her pockets with one hand, nearly dropping everything. Looking for these? Brandon dangled her keys from his finger. She reached for them, but he pulled them back. "The car's in my name, Naomi. It stays here." "What?" "No, that's not. We paid for that together." 30 seconds. She dropped her things and lunged for the keys, but he was faster. He stepped backward into the kitchen, holding them above his head like a cruel game. The soup pot still sat on the counter, a few drops of red liquid clinging to its rim. "Time's up," Brandon said. He walked past her to the front door and opened it wide. "Out. I need my car." "How am I supposed to?" "That's not my problem anymore." He picked up her belongings from where she dropped them and carried them outside, setting them on the porch. The photo albums landed at an angle, their pages fluttering in the evening breeze. Naomi stood in the doorway of the home she'd helped decorate, the home where she'd hosted Christmas dinners and birthday parties, the home where she'd imagined raising children someday. Her scalp still burned. Her clothes were stiff with drying soup. And her husband was staring at her like she was a stranger he wanted off his property. She stepped onto the porch and gathered her things. Her hands were full when she heard the door slam behind her, followed by the definitive click of the deadbolt sliding into place. She stood there for a moment, arms loaded with the scattered pieces of her life, and watched through the window as Brandon walked back into the kitchen. He picked up his phone from the counter and started typing, a small smile playing at his lips. Then she saw movement in the hallway beyond. A woman emerged from the downstairs bathroom, a woman Naomi had never seen before. She was wearing one of Naomi's robes, her blonde hair wrapped in one of Naomi's towels. She walked up to Brandon and kissed him on the mouth, her hands sliding around his waist. Brandon had been planning this. The soup, the 10-minute deadline, everything. And she'd been living with another woman in her house without even knowing it. Naomi turned away from the window and walked down the porch steps. She made it to the sidewalk before her knees gave out. She sank onto the concrete, her belongings scattered around her, and let herself cry for exactly 3 minutes. Then she stood up, dried her eyes and started walking. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Naomi walked 6 blocks before her feet started to blister. The evening air was cool against her soup-crusted clothes, and passers-by gave her strange looks as she hurried down the sidewalk with her arms full of belongings. She found a gas station with a bathroom and locked herself inside. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she examined herself in the mirror. Her dark skin was red and irritated where the soup had burned her. Her usually neat braids were matted with tomato residue. She looked like someone who'd survived a disaster, which she supposed was accurate. She used paper towels and hand soap to clean herself as best she could, wincing as she touched the tender spots on her scalp. Then she changed into the clothes she'd randomly grabbed, discovering she'd somehow packed 2 left shoes and a pair of winter pants despite it being June. She almost laughed. Almost. Her phone buzzed. A text from Brandon: "I've changed all the locks. Don't come back. Divorce papers will be ready Monday." She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the reply button. But what would she say? She needed time to think, to understand what had just happened, to figure out her next move. Another buzz. This time from an unknown number. "Stop calling Brandon. He's done with you." The blonde woman from her bathroom. Naomi hadn't called anyone. She'd been too shocked to even think about calling Brandon. She blocked the number and turned off her phone to preserve the battery. She couldn't stay in the gas station bathroom forever. She gathered her things and stepped back outside, where the sun was finally setting. She had $237 in her wallet, no car and nowhere to sleep. The public library was still open for another hour. She walked there slowly, her blistered feet protesting every step. Inside, she found an empty table in the corner and sat down, finally allowing herself to think. 7 years of marriage. 9 years together total. How had she missed the signs? But as she sat there in the quiet library, memories started surfacing. Brandon staying late at work more often over the past 6 months. His phone always facing down on the table. The way he'd stopped asking about her day or sharing details about his. She'd attributed it to stress from his job at the tech company. He'd said he was working on a major project. She'd believed him because why wouldn't she? They were married. They'd promised to be honest with each other. Naomi? Naomi Patterson? She looked up to find a woman standing beside her table. It took her a moment to place the face. Simone. They'd worked together at the accounting firm 3 years ago before Simone left to start her own business. Simone, hi. Naomi tried to smile, aware of how terrible she must look despite her attempt to clean up. Simone's eyes widened as she took in Naomi's appearance. Are you okay? What happened? And suddenly, the whole story came pouring out. Naomi heard herself describing the soup, the 10-minute deadline, the blonde woman in her bathrobe. She watched Simone's expression shift from shock to anger to determination. You're coming home with me, Simone said when Naomi finished. Right now. No arguments. I can't impose. You're not imposing. I have a guest room and you need a place to stay. Simone pulled out her phone. I'm calling my lawyer friend too. She specializes in divorce cases. What Brandon did, that's not just cruel, Naomi. That's assault. And if he's changed the locks on a house you own together, that's illegal. Naomi felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time since the soup had hit her head, she felt something other than shock and grief. She felt angry. Brandon had humiliated her, thrown her out of her own home, and was probably laughing about it with his mistress right now. Thank you, she whispered. Simone squeezed her shoulder. Come on. Let's get you somewhere safe. The guest room in Simone's apartment was small but clean. Simone provided fresh towels, a change of clothes that almost fit, and a first aid kit for Naomi's burns and blisters. Then she made chamomile tea and sat with Naomi at the kitchen table. I'm going to ask you something important, Simone said. And I need you to really think about it before you answer. Naomi nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Do you want him back? The question hung in the air. Naomi thought about Brandon's cold eyes, his countdown timer, his smile as he texted on his phone while his mistress emerged from the bathroom. She thought about 7 years of her life that suddenly felt like a lie. No, she said firmly. I want my dignity back. I want my fair share of what we built together. And I want him to face consequences for what he did. But I don't want him back. Simone smiled. Good. Because the Naomi I worked with 3 years ago was one of the sharpest accountants I ever met. That woman could spot financial discrepancies from a mile away. That woman knew how to document everything and build an airtight case. Naomi felt a spark of recognition. Simone was right. Before she'd married Brandon, before she'd settled into a comfortable routine at a smaller firm to accommodate his schedule, she'd been ambitious, driven, excellent at her job. I need to access our financial records, Naomi said slowly, before Brandon can hide anything. My laptop's in the living room. I'll make more tea. Simone stood up. And Naomi? Whatever you need to do to protect yourself and get what's legally yours, I'm here to help. Naomi moved to the couch with Simone's laptop and logged into her bank account. Her heart sank. Brandon had already transferred most of their joint savings to an account she couldn't access. But he'd made a mistake. He'd done it earlier today before kicking her out. Which meant there was a digital trail, timestamps, everything. She opened their shared credit card statements next. Large purchases over the past 6 months at stores she'd never been to. Jewelry. Women's clothing in sizes that weren't hers. Hotel rooms booked on weeknights when Brandon claimed he was working late. Her training kicked in. She started downloading statements, taking screenshots, organizing files. Brandon thought he could erase her from their life in 10 minutes? He was about to learn that she'd spent 9 years watching him and she knew things. She knew his passwords because he used the same one for everything. She knew which accounts he thought were secret. She knew exactly how to find proof of what he'd done. By midnight, she had a folder with over 300 pages of documentation. Transfers. Purchases. Emails he'd forgotten to delete from their shared cloud storage. Photos of him with the blonde woman, Amber, according to her email signature, dating back 2 years. 2 years. He'd been cheating on her for 2 years while she cooked his favorite dinners and planned their anniversary celebrations. Naomi saved everything to 3 different drives and emailed copies to herself. Then she leaned back on the couch and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would call Simone's lawyer friend. She would start building her case. She would figure out how to get back into her own house or at least get her belongings. But tonight she let herself grieve for the life she'd thought she had. She cried for the woman who'd sat down at her kitchen table expecting a normal Tuesday dinner. That woman was gone, burned away by scalding soup and cold betrayal. In her place was someone harder. Someone smarter. Someone who wasn't going to let Brandon win. The lawyer's office smelled like coffee and old books. Naomi sat across from Vanessa Chin. No, not Chin. Vanessa Howard. Vanessa Howard, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd spent the first 10 minutes of their meeting reviewing Naomi's documentation with increasing interest. This is good work, Vanessa said, tapping the printed spreadsheets Naomi had organized. Most people don't think to grab this kind of evidence before their spouse locks them out. You've got transaction records, email correspondence, even photos with metadata showing dates and locations. I'm an accountant, Naomi said quietly. Documentation is what I do. Then you already know what I'm seeing here. Vanessa pulled up a specific page. Your husband didn't just have an affair. He committed fraud. Look at this, he forged your signature on a home equity loan application 6 months ago. That's identity theft. And these transfers from your joint account to his personal account? He moved $60,000 without your authorization. Naomi felt her stomach twist. $60,000. Their savings from 9 years together, money she'd carefully budgeted and invested, gone. Can we get it back? We're going to try. But first, we need to establish that you have legal right to access the house. The deed is in both names, yes. Yes. We bought it together 5 years ago. Good. I'm filing an emergency motion this afternoon for you to be allowed back in to collect your belongings. I'm also filing for a restraining order against Brandon due to the assault. And yes, pouring boiling soup on someone absolutely qualifies as assault. We'll get photos of your injuries taken today for evidence. Naomi touched her scalp gently. The burns were healing but still tender. She'd been wearing scarves and hats to hide the damage. What about Amber? She asked. The woman he's with? Vanessa's expression hardened. If she knew he was married and actively participated in helping him hide assets or defraud you, she could face legal consequences too. Let me dig deeper into these emails you found. Over the next hour, Vanessa walked Naomi through the legal process. They would file for divorce immediately, requesting an equitable distribution of all marital assets. They would report the fraud to the bank and potentially to law enforcement. They would document every injury, every financial crime, every lie. I have to warn you, Vanessa said as their meeting concluded. This is going to get ugly. Brandon is going to fight back. Men like him don't like being held accountable. Are you prepared for that? Naomi thought about the soup dripping down her face, about Brandon's countdown timer, about seeing another woman in her bathrobe. Yes, she said. I'm prepared. That afternoon, accompanied by a police officer and Vanessa, Naomi returned to her house. Brandon's car wasn't in the driveway, but Amber's sedan was. The blonde woman answered the door wearing yoga pants and a smug smile that faltered when she saw the police officer. I'm here to collect my belongings, Naomi said calmly. I have a court order. Amber tried to block the doorway. Brandon said you're not allowed here. The police officer stepped forward. Ma'am, this woman is on the deed to this property. She has every legal right to be here. You can step aside or I can arrest you for obstruction. Amber moved. Naomi walked into her own house with her head high. Everything looked the same but felt different. There was a wine glass on the coffee table with lipstick on the rim, not her shade. Amber's shoes by the door. A different scent in the air, something floral and cloying that made Naomi's stomach turn. She went upstairs to the master bedroom and started packing systematically. Clothes. Personal documents from the home office. The computer from her desk that had all her work files. She took photos of everything as she went, documenting what was hers versus what Brandon had bought. In the closet she found more evidence. Dresses in Amber's size, still with tags on them. Shopping bags from expensive stores. A jewelry box she'd never seen before filled with pieces that weren't hers. Brandon had been buying gifts for his mistress with their joint money and keeping them in their shared home. Naomi photographed everything. She found his laptop in the office, still logged in. He'd always been careless with security. She plugged in a flash drive and copied his entire hard drive. Emails, documents, photos, everything. It took 20 minutes. Downstairs, she could hear Amber on the phone, her voice shrill as she presumably called Brandon. In the filing cabinet, Naomi discovered something that made her blood run cold. Loan documents she'd never seen before. Brandon had taken out 3 separate loans using the house as collateral, forging her signature each time. The total amount was over $200,000. Where had the money gone? She checked the dates against her records. The loans had been taken out over the past year, but she couldn't find corresponding deposits in any account she knew about. She took photos of every document, then carefully put them back exactly as she'd found them. The police officer appeared in the doorway. Ma'am, I think you should know, the husband just pulled up outside. He's on his phone and looks agitated. I'm almost done, Naomi said. She grabbed the last of her things and headed downstairs just as Brandon burst through the front door. He stopped short when he saw her. His face was red, his eyes wild. What do you think you're doing? Collecting my property, Naomi said. I have a court order. Officer Mitchell here can show you. Brandon's hands clenched into fists. You can't just walk in here. Actually, she can, the officer said. Her name is on the deed. Now, I suggest you step back and let her leave peacefully. You're going to regret this, Naomi, Brandon hissed. I will make your life hell. You'll get nothing in the divorce. Nothing. Naomi met his eyes. She remembered being afraid of him 3 days ago when he poured soup over her head. Now she just felt sorry for him. He had no idea what was coming. We'll see, she said quietly. She walked past him to Simone's car parked outside, where her friend was waiting. She loaded her belongings into the trunk while Brandon watched from the doorway, Amber clutching his arm. As they drove away, Simone glanced at her. How did it go? I found evidence of over $200,000 in fraudulent loans, Naomi said. And I copied his entire hard drive. Simone whistled low. He really thought you'd just disappear quietly, didn't he? He thought I was weak, Naomi said, watching her house disappear in the side mirror. He was wrong. That evening, Naomi sat in Simone's guest room and went through Brandon's copied files. She found emails to Amber discussing their plans to sell the house and split the proceeds. She found messages to his friends laughing about getting rid of dead weight. She found searches in his browser history for how to hide assets in divorce and quickest way to divorce. But she also found something else. Bank statements for an account she'd never known existed. Deposits totaling $180,000, almost exactly matching the fraudulent loans. But the money had been systematically withdrawn over the past 6 months in increments just under $10,000, the threshold that would trigger automatic reporting to federal authorities. Brandon was laundering money. But whose money and why? She dug deeper into his emails and found correspondence with someone named Trevor, discussing the shipment and payment schedules, and keeping everything off the books. There were mentions of a warehouse and delivery dates. Naomi's hands started shaking as she read. Brandon wasn't just cheating on her and stealing from her. He was involved in something illegal, something that could potentially be dangerous. She immediately forwarded everything to Vanessa with a note. Found evidence of possible criminal activity beyond fraud. Need to discuss next steps. Then she backed up all the files again, saved copies to cloud storage with strong encryption, and sat back to think. Brandon had kicked her out of their house thinking she would quietly accept the divorce and disappear. He'd underestimated her completely. And now she had evidence that could not only win her the divorce and her fair share of assets, it could potentially put him in prison. The question was, what did she want to do with this information? She thought about the woman she'd been a week ago, sitting at her kitchen table expecting a normal dinner. That woman would have been terrified. That woman might have even thought about protecting Brandon despite what he'd done. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She picked up her phone and called Vanessa's emergency line. "I think my husband is involved in something criminal," she said when the lawyer answered. "And I have proof." Vanessa's voice was alert despite the late hour. "Don't touch anything else on that computer. I'm calling a friend at the FBI white-collar crime division. What you've stumbled into could be much bigger than divorce fraud." Naomi's hands trembled as she closed the laptop. "FBI? You think it's that serious? Money laundering in those amounts, offshore accounts, talk of shipments and warehouses? Yes, I think it's that serious. This might not just be about your divorce anymore, Naomi. You might be a witness to federal crimes." 2 days later, Naomi sat in a stark conference room with Vanessa, an FBI agent named Robert Torres, and a federal prosecutor. They'd spent 3 hours going through every file she'd copied from Brandon's computer. "Mrs. Patterson," Agent Torres said, "you've provided us with evidence of an operation we've been investigating for 8 months. Your husband and his associate Trevor Donovan have been running a smuggling ring, bringing in counterfeit designer goods from overseas and selling them as authentic through several online storefronts." Naomi stared at him. "Counterfeit goods? Like fake handbags?" "Handbags, watches, shoes, electronics. The operation is sophisticated. They use real warehouse space, legitimate-seeming websites, even have fake authentication certificates. They've defrauded consumers out of millions of dollars." "And Amber?" Naomi asked. "The woman he's with?" The prosecutor, a woman named Patricia Griffin, slid a photo across the table. "Amber Walsh. She's Trevor's sister and the financial manager of the operation. She handles the money laundering, setting up shell companies, moving funds through cryptocurrency. She's been living in your house to stay close to Brandon and coordinate their activities." Naomi felt sick. She'd been married to a criminal. Worse, she'd been living in the same house where they'd been planning their crimes, completely oblivious. "Did you know any of this?" Agent Torres asked gently. "No, nothing. I thought Brandon worked for a tech company. He left for work every morning, came home every evening. I had no idea." "That's actually helpful for our case," Patricia said. "You're clearly not involved. But we need your continued cooperation. We want to build an airtight case against all 3 of them, Brandon, Amber, and Trevor." "What do you need me to do?" Agent Torres leaned forward. "First, we need you to continue with your divorce proceedings exactly as planned. Brandon can't know we're investigating him. Second, if he contacts you trying to get you to sign anything or agree to any kind of settlement, we need to know immediately. He might try to use the divorce to hide assets or secure your silence." "He already thinks I'm just a scorned wife trying to get her fair share," Naomi said. "He has no idea I found evidence of the smuggling operation." "Perfect. Keep it that way." Patricia pulled out a new folder. "We're going to need your testimony eventually, probably in 6 to 8 months when we're ready to make arrests. In the meantime, we've gotten a warrant to monitor their communications and financial transactions. Your evidence gave us probable cause." Vanessa spoke up. "What about Naomi's divorce? She still needs to protect her interests and get her assets back." "We'll work with you," Patricia assured them. "Mrs. Patterson is entitled to her fair share of legitimate marital assets. Once we've seized the criminal proceeds, we'll make sure she's not held liable for any of Brandon's crimes. But the divorce might take longer than usual because we need to let the criminal investigation play out first." Over the next 2 weeks, Naomi's life became a careful balancing act. She moved into a small studio apartment, funded by a loan from Simone that she promised to repay. She started sending out resumes for accounting positions, needing to rebuild her career and financial independence. Brandon's lawyer sent over divorce papers demanding she sign within 30 days. The proposed settlement was insulting. He wanted to keep the house, the cars, most of their savings, claiming she'd contributed less to the marriage since she'd taken a lower-paying job 3 years ago. On Vanessa's advice, Naomi rejected the offer and countered with her own demands. 50% of all legitimate assets, reimbursement for the $60,000 he'd stolen from their joint account, and compensation for the assault with the soup. Brandon's response came via his lawyer. My client believes your demands are unreasonable. He's willing to offer you $20,000 as a final settlement if you agree not to pursue assault charges. $20,000. Out of everything they'd built together over 9 years, he thought she deserved $20,000. Naomi showed the offer to Agent Torres during their weekly check-in meeting. He shook his head. He's desperate to close this quickly and keep you quiet. That tells me he knows the house is full of evidence and he wants you locked into a settlement agreement before you can cause more trouble. What if I pressure him? Naomi asked. What if I threaten to go public with the assault, file a police report, maybe even talk to his employer? Agent Torres considered this. It might flush him out, make him do something reckless. But it could also be dangerous. These people have made millions from their criminal operation. People have been hurt for less. I'm already in danger just by existing, Naomi pointed out. He knows I could expose him at any moment. At least if I push back, I maintain some control. Patricia joined them via video call from her office. I think Naomi has a point. If we can get Brandon to make threats, offer bribes, or attempt to tamper with a witness, that gives us additional charges. But Naomi, you need to understand the risk. These people won't hesitate to intimidate you or worse. Naomi thought about the soup burning her scalp, about being thrown out of her own home, about the smug look on Amber's face. She thought about other women who might be married to criminals without knowing it, other people who'd bought fake designer goods thinking they were real. I'll do it, she said. Tell me what to say. The next morning, Naomi filed an official police report about the assault. She included photos of her burns and a detailed statement about Brandon's threats. The local news picked up the story, woman assaulted and thrown from home by husband, and ran it on the evening broadcast. Brandon's response was immediate. He called her 23 times in 1 hour. When she didn't answer, he showed up at her apartment building. She watched from her window as Agent Torres, who'd been stationed nearby, intercepted him before he could get to her door. Then the messages started. First from Brandon, you're making a huge mistake. Drop the charges now or you'll regret it. Then from Amber, you're ruining his life over nothing. He barely touched you. Stop being dramatic. Finally, from a number she didn't recognize, smart people know when to keep quiet. Think about your future. Each message was documented, recorded, and added to the FBI's case file. Brandon was making it easier with every threat. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Brandon's former employees reached out to Naomi through social media after seeing the news story. I think your husband might owe me money, the message read. I worked for his tech company for 6 months last year. Turns out it wasn't a real company at all. He never paid my last 2 months of wages. I have documentation if you want it. Naomi forwarded the message to Agent Torres immediately. Within days, they'd located 5 other former employees with similar stories. Brandon had hired them to help process orders for his fake designer goods website, telling them they worked for a legitimate e-commerce company. When they'd started asking questions about why none of the inventory matched the product descriptions, he'd fired them without paying their final wages. This is good, Patricia said during their next meeting. Not only do we have smuggling and fraud, but now we have wage theft and labor violations. The more charges we can stack, the more leverage we have for a strong plea deal or conviction. How much longer before you can arrest them? Naomi asked. Soon, Agent Torres said. We're coordinating with customs officials to catch the next shipment. When Trevor's crew goes to the warehouse to receive it, we'll have them all in one place. Naomi returned to her tiny studio apartment that evening and looked at the second-hand furniture Simone had helped her acquire, the few belongings she'd managed to salvage from her old life. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Built by her choices, her efforts. She'd started doing freelance accounting work for small businesses, slowly rebuilding her professional reputation. The money wasn't much yet, but it was honest work, and it felt good to be in control of her own income again. Her phone buzzed with an email from Vanessa. Brandon's lawyer called. He's increased his settlement offer to $50,000 if you sign this week and agree not to testify against him in any future legal proceedings. Naomi smiled. He was scared. He knew something was coming but couldn't figure out what. He thought she was just a wronged wife making noise, when really she was helping build the case that would take down his entire operation. She typed her response, "Tell his lawyer I'll see him in court." 2 days later, Agent Torres called her at midnight. "We're making the arrest tomorrow morning. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Don't go anywhere near your old house or any of the business locations. Stay put, keep your doors locked, and I'll call you when it's done." Naomi didn't sleep that night. She sat by her window watching the city lights and thought about justice, about revenge, about the complicated satisfaction of knowing that Brandon's downfall wasn't just about their marriage, it was about every person he'd defrauded, every employee he'd cheated, every law he'd broken. When dawn broke over the city, somewhere across town, federal agents were preparing to execute their warrants. And Brandon, who'd thought pouring soup over his wife's head and throwing her out in 10 minutes would be the end of their story, was about to learn it had only been the beginning. The arrests made national news. Naomi watched the footage from her apartment. Federal agents swarming the warehouse, Brandon being led out in handcuffs while news cameras flashed. Amber was arrested at the house, Naomi's house, screaming about her rights while agents carried out boxes of evidence. Trevor was caught trying to flee through a back entrance of his office building. Multi-million-dollar counterfeit operation busted. The headlines read, "3 arrested in designer goods fraud scheme." Naomi's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters had somehow gotten her number, wanting comments about her husband's arrest. Brandon's family called demanding to know what she'd done. His mother left a voicemail accusing Naomi of ruining her son's life out of spite. She ignored them all except for one call from Agent Torres. "It went smoothly," he said. "We seized over $3 million in counterfeit goods, account records, computers, everything. Brandon and his associates are being held without bail due to flight risk. The prosecutor wanted me to thank you. Your evidence broke this case wide open." "What happens now?" Naomi asked. "They'll be formally charged within 48 hours. Given the evidence, we expect guilty pleas, but if they fight it, there will be a trial. You'd be called as a witness for the financial fraud and the evidence you gathered." After hanging up, Naomi sat in silence for a long moment. 7 years of marriage, and she'd been sleeping next to a criminal the entire time. How had she missed it? But deep down she knew. She'd been trusting. She'd been focused on her own work, her own life. She'd believed Brandon when he said he was working late, believed the legitimate-looking pay stubs he'd created for his fake company. The guilt tried to creep in, but Vanessa's voice echoed in her memory from their first meeting. "You're not responsible for his choices. You're only responsible for how you respond now." Naomi had chosen to respond by exposing the truth. Now she needed to focus on rebuilding. Simone knocked on her door that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. "I saw the news. You okay?" "I think so," Naomi said. "It's surreal. Part of me keeps expecting to wake up and find out this whole month has been a nightmare." "It is a nightmare," Simone agreed, pouring wine into mismatched glasses. "But you're handling it better than most people would. Do you know what I see when I look at you? The same smart, capable woman I worked with 3 years ago. You just forgot for a while." "Brandon made me forget," Naomi said quietly. "He convinced me that working part-time at a small firm was better for our marriage. He said my ambition made him feel inadequate. So I scaled back, took a lesser position, made less money. And then he used that against me in the divorce negotiations." Simone's expression hardened. "Men like him are experts at dimming other people's lights so they can feel brighter. But your light is still there, Naomi. You proved that by taking him down." Over the next week, Naomi started receiving calls from women she'd never met. Women who'd seen the news coverage and recognized Brandon from dates they'd been on, from online interactions, from brief relationships that had ended strangely. Apparently, Brandon had been active on multiple dating apps while married to Naomi, always claiming to be single, sometimes using a fake name. One woman, Sharon, had even been engaged to him briefly 2 years ago before discovering he was actually married. "He told me his wife died in a car accident," Sharon said during their phone call. "He had this whole elaborate story. When I found out the truth, he ghosted me completely. I tried to warn you actually. I found you on social media and sent a message, but you never responded." Naomi checked her message requests folder on social media, the one where messages from non-friends go. There it was, Sharon's warning from 18 months ago, sitting unread because Naomi had never thought to check that folder. "I'm so sorry," Sharon said. "I should have tried harder to reach you." "It's not your fault," Naomi assured her. "He was good at manipulation. We were both victims of his lies." But Sharon's information was valuable. She had text messages from Brandon, photos of them together, even receipts from trips he'd claimed were business travel. Naomi forwarded everything to Agent Torres, adding to the mountain of evidence against her soon-to-be ex-husband. The divorce proceedings took a dramatic turn after the arrests. Brandon's lawyer withdrew from the case, unwilling to represent a federal criminal defendant. The new lawyer who took over immediately filed motions to delay everything until after the criminal case concluded. Vanessa fought back hard. Your client committed fraud against my client long before his arrest. The divorce proceeds regardless of criminal charges. Mrs. Patterson is entitled to her fair share of legitimate assets, and she needs access to those assets now, not in a year when the criminal case wraps up. The judge agreed. An emergency hearing was scheduled to divide assets and determine temporary support while the criminal and divorce cases moved forward in parallel. At the hearing, Naomi saw Brandon for the first time since the arrests. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he'd lost weight. When he saw her across the courtroom, his expression twisted with rage. "This is all your fault," he hissed loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you just sign the papers like I told you." "Mr. Patterson, I suggest you remain silent," his lawyer said urgently. But Brandon ignored him. "You think you've won? You've destroyed everything. The house will be seized. The accounts are frozen. There's nothing left to split." "Then you should have thought of that before you became a criminal," Naomi said calmly. The judge banged his gavel. "Order. Mr. Patterson, one more outburst and you'll be removed from this courtroom." The hearing lasted 4 hours. Vanessa presented evidence of Brandon's theft from their joint accounts, the forged signatures, the assault. Brandon's lawyer tried to argue that Naomi had violated privacy laws by copying his hard drive without permission. Mrs. Patterson was accessing a computer in her own home, which she co-owned, Vanessa countered. She had every right to access files on devices in that home, especially when she discovered evidence of crimes being committed against her. In the end, the judge ruled in Naomi's favor on almost everything. She was awarded temporary support payments of $3,000 per month to come from Brandon's frozen but legitimate assets. She was given full ownership of her car, which Brandon had been preventing her from accessing. And the house would be sold, with proceeds split 50-50 after the government took its share for restitution to Brandon's victims. Furthermore, the judge said sternly, looking at Brandon, "I'm granting Mrs. Patterson's request for a permanent restraining order. You are not to contact her directly or indirectly, you are not to come within 500 feet of her residence or workplace, and any violation will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand?" Brandon glared at Naomi but nodded. As they left the courthouse, Vanessa squeezed Naomi's arm. "That went better than I expected. You're going to be okay financially while this all plays out." But the real victory came 2 days later when Patricia Griffin called with an update on the criminal case. "Brandon's lawyer approached us about a plea deal," she said. "He knows we have an airtight case. He's willing to plead guilty to fraud, smuggling, and money laundering in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation." "How reduced?" Naomi asked. "We're asking for 8 to 10 years. With good behavior he could be out in 6. It's less than the 15 to 20 he'd face if convicted at trial, but it guarantees he does significant time." "And Amber? Trevor?" "Amber's fighting. She thinks she can beat the charges. Trevor's negotiating his own deal. They'll likely turn on each other, which only strengthens our case." Naomi thought about Brandon spending the next 8 years in federal prison. It felt surreal. This was the man she'd planned to have children with, the man she'd trusted with her life and her future. "Do you need me to agree to the plea deal?" she asked. "No. This is a federal criminal case. You're a witness, not a party to the plea negotiations. But I wanted you to know. It means you probably won't have to testify at trial. The divorce can proceed without waiting for a criminal verdict." After hanging up, Naomi walked to the small desk in her studio apartment where she'd been working on something new, a business plan. She'd been thinking about all the women who'd reached out to her, all the stories of financial abuse and manipulation she'd heard. She'd been thinking about her skills as an accountant and her new understanding of how people hide assets. She'd started drafting a plan for a consulting service, helping women going through divorce protect themselves financially, uncover hidden assets, document abuse. The market research showed a huge need. Most women had no idea how to protect themselves when a marriage ended, especially if their partner was hiding money or committing fraud. Simone had already offered to invest as a silent partner. "You helped expose a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme," she'd said. "Imagine what you could do for women who just need someone on their side who knows how money works and how people hide it." Naomi opened her business plan document and added a new section, Founder Story. She wrote about the soup, about being thrown out with 10 minutes notice, about discovering the truth. She wrote about fighting back, about gathering evidence, about refusing to be silenced or intimidated. She wrote about revenge that came through justice rather than destruction, about building something new rather than just tearing down what was old. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, fear spiked through her. Brandon wasn't supposed to contact her. But the message was from Sharon, the woman who'd been engaged to Brandon. I saw the court ruling in the news. I'm so proud of you. If you ever need anything, I'm here. Women need to stick together against men like him. Naomi smiled and saved the number. Then she returned to her business plan, fingers flying across the keyboard as she outlined her vision for helping other women fight back against financial abuse. Brandon had tried to erase her in 10 minutes. Instead, he'd created someone stronger, smarter, and more determined than the woman he'd married. And now she was going to make sure other women had the tools to fight back too. The best revenge, she realized, wasn't hurting Brandon. It was building a life and a business that would outlast his crimes and help prevent other women from suffering the same fate. She was just getting started. 3 months after Brandon's arrest, Naomi signed the lease on a small office space downtown. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms on the 3rd floor of an older building, but it was hers. The sign she hung outside read, Patterson Financial Consulting, protecting your assets, securing your future. Simone helped her move in second-hand furniture and set up the computers. You're really doing this, her friend said, looking around the space with approval. I really am, Naomi confirmed. She'd spent the past 12 weeks getting her certifications in order, consulting with lawyers about liability issues, and developing her service offerings. She'd also been quietly building a reputation by helping 3 women pro bono, women who'd reached out after seeing news coverage of Brandon's case. All 3 cases had ended favorably. She'd helped one woman uncover her husband's secret offshore account. She'd helped another document financial abuse for her divorce case. She'd helped a third identify forged signatures on loan documents, leading to fraud charges against the woman's ex-partner. Word was spreading. By the end of her first official week in business, Naomi had 4 paying clients and a waiting list. I can't afford a real investigator or forensic accountant, one client told her during their initial consultation. The divorce is already costing me everything. But I know he's hiding money somehow. He claims he's broke, but he just bought a new boat. Naomi smiled. Let's start with his tax returns and credit report. People who hide assets usually leave trails, you just have to know where to look. Within 2 weeks, she tracked down 3 undisclosed bank accounts and a rental property the husband had put in his brother's name. Her client's lawyer was ecstatic. The work was satisfying in a way her previous accounting job had never been. She wasn't just balancing books or filing taxes. She was helping women protect themselves, exposing liars and ensuring fair settlements. Every hidden asset she uncovered, every fraud she documented, felt like small justice. But her own case was far from over. Brandon's plea deal had hit a snag. Amber had decided to cooperate with prosecutors, and her testimony revealed that Brandon's operation was even more extensive than investigators had originally thought. He hadn't just been selling counterfeit designer goods, he'd also been involved in credit card fraud, using stolen card numbers to make purchases that were then resold. This changes everything, Patricia told Naomi during their monthly update call. With Amber's testimony, we can add identity theft and wire fraud to the charges. We're no longer looking at 8 to 10 years. We're looking at 15 to 20. How does Brandon feel about that? Naomi asked. He's furious. His lawyer is scrambling to negotiate a new deal, but we have no incentive to offer better terms. Amber gave us everything: names, dates, transaction records. She's even testifying about the soup incident and how Brandon planned it as intimidation. She was there. She was in the house, yes. She claims Brandon told her to stay hidden until he'd gotten you out. She says she felt uncomfortable about it but went along because she was in love with him. Naomi felt a flash of anger. Amber had watched her get burned by boiling soup and thrown out of her own home, and her only concern had been her relationship with Brandon. I hope she gets prison time too, Naomi said flatly. She will, Patricia assured her. Cooperation doesn't mean immunity. She's still guilty of money laundering and fraud. She'll likely get 5 to 7 years, but it could have been 15 without her testimony. Meanwhile, the divorce was finally moving forward. The house had been sold, at a loss because the housing market had softened and because everyone knew about its history. After the government took its share for victim restitution and legal fees were paid, Naomi received $43,000. It wasn't the six-figure settlement she'd hoped for, but it was enough to properly fund her business and rent a better apartment. She moved into a one-bedroom unit with actual sunlight and space for a home office. She bought real furniture instead of second-hand pieces. She got her hair professionally styled for the first time in months, treating herself to an appointment at a nice salon. The woman in the mirror looked different from the one who'd had soup poured on her head. This woman had stronger shoulders, a steadier gaze, a hint of pride in her expression. Her business grew steadily. By month 6, she'd helped 23 women. By month 9, she needed to hire an assistant. She found Jasmine. No, not Jasmine. She found Rita, a recent graduate with an accounting degree and a personal history of financial abuse. "My ex-husband destroyed my credit and stole my identity," Rita told her during the interview. "I want to help other women avoid what I went through." She was perfect for the role. Together, they expanded the business to offer credit repair services alongside the asset investigation work. One afternoon, a woman named Grace walked into Naomi's office with a familiar story. "My husband says we're broke and I need to get a job to support us," she explained. "But I've seen expensive purchases, trips he takes without me, meals at restaurants I never attend. I think he's hiding money." Naomi spent 3 weeks on Grace's case. What she uncovered was staggering. The husband had not only hidden accounts, but he'd stolen Grace's inheritance from her deceased mother by forging her signature on transfer documents. "This is criminal fraud," Naomi told Grace gently. "You need to file a police report. I'll provide all the documentation you need." Grace started crying. "I can't believe he did this. We've been married 15 years. I trusted him completely." Naomi handed her a tissue and sat down beside her. "I know, but you're not powerless. You found out, you got help, and now you're going to fight back. That's what matters." Grace looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "How did you get so strong? How do you do this work every day?" Naomi thought about the soup, about the 10-minute countdown, about discovering Brandon's crimes. "Someone did this to me," she said quietly, "and I decided that the best way to heal was to make sure other women didn't have to go through it alone. Every case I win, every dollar I recover, every liar I expose, it's justice not just for my clients but for me too." Grace's case resulted in criminal charges against her husband and a divorce settlement that included restitution for the stolen inheritance. She sent Naomi a thank you card with a photo of herself on graduation day from a nursing program. "I went back to school with the money you helped me recover. Thank you for giving me my life back." Naomi put the card on her office wall alongside others from grateful clients. The wall was filling up with evidence of lives changed, women empowered, families protected. But the most important development came 10 months after Brandon's arrest. Patricia called on a Tuesday morning, her voice excited. "We have a trial date for Brandon. February 15th. Are you ready to testify? I thought he was pleading guilty? He changed his mind." Amber's testimony implicated him in additional crimes he hadn't been charged with yet, specifically bribing a customs official and threatening a witness who tried to report him. He's decided to take his chances with a jury rather than accept a 20-year sentence. Naomi's stomach flipped. "Do you think you'll win?" "Absolutely. We have physical evidence, financial records, testimony from multiple witnesses including Amber and Trevor, and your documentation of the fraud and assault. But I need you strong on that stand, Naomi. His lawyer will try to discredit you, claim you were a vengeful spouse making false accusations." "I'm ready," Naomi said. And she meant it. She spent the next 3 months preparing her testimony with Patricia. They reviewed every document, every timeline, every piece of evidence. They practiced cross-examination questions, anticipated defense strategies, went over and over the details until Naomi could recite them in her sleep. The night before the trial, Simone took her out to dinner. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous. Excited. Ready." Naomi sipped her water. "I keep thinking about how scared I was when this all started. How powerless I felt. And now I'm going to walk into that courtroom and tell the truth about what he did." "You're going to be amazing," Simone said. "And when this is over, when he's convicted and sentenced, you can finally close this chapter completely." Naomi nodded, but deep down she knew the chapter had closed months ago. She'd moved on the moment she decided to fight back instead of accepting defeat. The trial was just the official ending to a story she'd already moved past. The next morning, she dressed in a professional Navy suit and took a car service to the courthouse. News cameras lined the entrance. Brandon's case had drawn significant media attention because of the scope of the fraud and the dramatic assault that had started it all. Inside, she met Patricia in a conference room. Remember, stay calm, answer only what's asked, and don't let his lawyer rattle you. You've got this. When they called her name, Naomi walked into the courtroom with her head high. She saw Brandon at the defense table, looking older and harder than she remembered. He stared at her with unconcealed hatred. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then she did exactly that. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Naomi testified for 2 full days, walking the jury through everything: the soup incident, her discovery of Brandon's crimes, the evidence she'd gathered. Brandon's lawyer tried to portray her as a bitter ex-wife fabricating charges, but the documentation was too strong. Her testimony was too clear, too detailed, too obviously truthful. When they showed the jury photos of her burns from the soup, several jurors looked away from Brandon in disgust. When they played the recording of his threatening voicemails, his lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed them as evidence of witness intimidation. Amber testified next, describing the entire smuggling operation in detail. She claimed Brandon had manipulated her into participating, but her own emails showed active involvement and financial benefit. The jury didn't look sympathetic. Trevor's testimony was devastating. He'd taken a plea deal in exchange for cooperating, and he confirmed every detail of the operation, including Brandon's role as the primary planner and decision-maker. The verdict came back after 4 hours of deliberation: guilty on all counts. Fraud, money laundering, smuggling, assault, witness intimidation, identity theft. The judge scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. Naomi wasn't in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She'd returned to work, refusing to put her life on hold, waiting for closure. Patricia called her with the news. "He'll likely get 18 to 22 years, Patricia said. "With his criminal record now established, he'll serve at least 85% of the sentence. He won't be eligible for parole for at least 15 years. 15 years. Brandon would be in his 50s when he got out. Naomi would be in her 40s, likely with a fully established business, a completely different life. How do you feel?" Patricia asked. Naomi thought about it. She didn't feel triumphant or celebratory. She didn't feel vindictive. She felt relieved. "I feel like justice was served," she said finally. "Not just for me but for everyone he hurt. You should be proud of yourself. You could have just taken a settlement and walked away, but you fought for accountability. That matters." After hanging up, Naomi sat at her desk and looked around her office. Rita was on the phone with a new client, taking notes and asking detailed questions. The wall of thank you cards had grown. She'd helped 47 women now, recovering over $2 million in hidden or stolen assets. She'd done that while Brandon's criminal case played out, while the divorce was finalized, while the world watched and judged and commented. She'd built something real and valuable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Simone: "Guilty on all counts. Drinks tonight to celebrate?" Naomi smiled and texted back, "Absolutely. But first she had work to do." A new client was coming in at 3, a woman whose husband had emptied their retirement accounts and claimed they'd lost the money in bad investments. Naomi had already found evidence that he'd transferred the funds to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. That evening, Simone arrived at Naomi's apartment with champagne and takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant. They sat on the balcony of Naomi's new place, looking out over the city lights. "Here's to justice," Simone said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," Naomi countered. They clinked glasses and drank. The champagne was sweet and cold, and for the first time in a year, Naomi felt completely at peace. "Have you thought about what's next?" Simone asked. "The business is doing well. You've got a steady client base. Where do you see this going?" Naomi had been thinking about exactly that. "I want to expand. Maybe open offices in other cities. Train other women to do what I do, help clients investigate financial fraud, protect their assets during divorce. There's such a huge need." "You could franchise it," Simone suggested. "Or create an online training program. Teach accountants and lawyers how to spot financial abuse." The ideas sparked something in Naomi's mind. She could see it: a network of consultants across the country, all trained in her methods, all working to protect women from financial abuse. Maybe even a nonprofit arm that offered free services to women who couldn't afford to pay. "I'd need more capital," she said slowly, "and help with the business structure. But yes, I think that's exactly what I want to do." Simone grinned. "Then let's make it happen. I'll invest more if you need it. And I know other women who'd probably be interested in backing this. What you're doing is important, Naomi. It deserves to grow." Over the next 6 months, Naomi worked harder than she ever had in her life. She hired a business consultant to help structure the expansion. She created training materials and standard operating procedures. She developed a certification program for consultants who wanted to join her network. She also started speaking publicly about financial abuse and divorce fraud. Local women's groups invited her to give talks. Lawyers asked her to train their staff on recognizing hidden assets. She appeared on podcasts and local news shows, always telling her story: the soup, the 10 minutes, the investigation, the victory. "The thing people need to understand," she said during one podcast interview, "is that financial abuse is incredibly common but rarely discussed. Your partner controls all the money? That's financial abuse. They hide accounts from you? That's financial abuse. They make major financial decisions without your input or knowledge. That's financial abuse. And it's often the first warning sign of other problems in the relationship." The episode went viral. Within a week, Naomi's office was flooded with calls from women who'd heard the interview and recognized their own situations in her descriptions. She hired 2 more consultants to handle the increased caseload. Then 3 more. By the end of the year, she had 10 people working for her company and plans to open a second office across the state. Brandon's sentencing happened on a cold morning in January, exactly 13 months after he'd poured soup over her head. Naomi attended, sitting in the back row of the courtroom with Vanessa beside her. The judge gave a lengthy speech about Brandon's crimes, the harm he'd caused, and the breach of trust he'd committed. "You defrauded consumers, you stole from your wife, you assaulted her when she became inconvenient to your plans. You showed no remorse, no accountability, no recognition of the pain you caused. Society needs to be protected from people like you." The sentence: 20 years in federal prison followed by 5 years of supervised release. Restitution to be paid to all victims in the amount of $3.2 million. Permanent prohibition from operating any business or handling finances for others. Brandon stood silently as the sentence was read, his shoulders slumped in defeat. When the marshals came to lead him away, he looked back at the courtroom. His eyes found Naomi's. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. She wanted him to see what she'd become: strong, successful, unbowed. She wanted him to know that his attempt to destroy her had failed completely. Then she stood up and walked out of the courthouse without looking back. Vanessa caught up with her on the steps. "How does it feel?" "Like the last page of a very long book," Naomi said. "I'm ready to start a new one." That evening, Naomi sat in her office after everyone had gone home and updated her business plan. She'd learned so much in the past year about resilience, about justice, about the power of refusing to be a victim. She opened a new document and titled it, "The Patterson Method, a comprehensive guide to financial investigation in divorce cases." If she was going to expand her business and train other consultants, they needed a textbook, a manual, a resource that consolidated everything she'd learned. She'd start with the basics: how to access financial records, how to spot discrepancies, how to document evidence properly. Then she'd move into advanced techniques: offshore accounts, shell companies, cryptocurrency hiding places. She'd include case studies, including her own. She'd be honest about the emotional toll, the difficulty of facing a partner's betrayal, the challenge of maintaining objectivity while feeling personally violated. But she'd also write about the satisfaction of uncovering truth, of helping someone protect themselves, of knowing that every hidden dollar found was justice served. She worked until midnight, words pouring out of her faster than she could type. This book would be her legacy, her way of ensuring that what she'd learned from Brandon's betrayal would help countless other women protect themselves. When she finally closed her laptop and headed home, she felt a deep sense of purpose. Brandon had tried to erase her. Instead, he'd created someone who would spend the rest of her career making sure men like him couldn't hurt women the way he'd hurt her. The best revenge, she'd learned, wasn't destroying your enemy. It was building something so strong, so valuable, so meaningful that they became irrelevant to your story. Brandon would spend the next 2 decades in prison, his reputation destroyed, his future opportunities limited. Naomi would spend the next 2 decades helping women, building her business and creating a legacy of empowerment and justice. She knew which future she preferred. 2 years after Brandon's sentencing, Naomi stood on a small stage at a women's business conference, addressing an audience of 200 people. Her company, Patterson Financial Consulting, now had offices in 5 states and employed 30 consultants. Her book had been published to critical acclaim and was required reading in several university forensic accounting programs. "Financial abuse thrives in silence," she told the audience. It depends on victims being too ashamed, too confused, or too afraid to speak up. The moment we start talking about it, documenting it, exposing it, that's when we take away its power. The speech received a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of women approached her with their own stories. Some wanted to hire her services. Others just wanted to tell her how her work had inspired them to leave abusive relationships or start their own businesses. One woman stood patiently at the end of the line. When she finally reached Naomi, she handed over a business card. Special Agent Leslie Monroe, FBI Financial Crimes Division. "Mrs. Patterson, I've been following your work," Agent Monroe said. "Your methods for uncovering hidden assets and financial fraud are exceptional. We'd like to discuss a potential consulting relationship with the Bureau. We could use your expertise on cases involving financial crimes in domestic situations." Naomi looked at the card, then at the agent. 3 years ago, she'd been a woman getting soup poured on her head. Now the FBI wanted to consult with her. "I'd be very interested in discussing that," she said. Over coffee the next morning, Agent Monroe explained the proposal. "We see a lot of cases where financial crimes are connected to domestic abuse or organized fraud rings. Your background gives you insights our agents don't have. You understand both the accounting side and the personal dynamics. We'd hire you as a consultant to review cases and provide analysis." It was a dream opportunity. Naomi negotiated terms that would allow her to maintain her private practice while also consulting for the FBI on select cases. The additional income would fund the nonprofit arm of her business she'd been planning. She officially launched the Patterson Foundation 6 months later. Its mission: providing free financial consulting services to women escaping abusive relationships. Funded by donations and Naomi's FBI consulting fees, the foundation helped women who couldn't afford private investigators or forensic accountants. "Every woman deserves protection," Naomi said during the foundation's launch event. "Regardless of her income, her education, or her circumstances. Financial abuse shouldn't be something only wealthy women can escape from." The foundation's first year served 83 women. The second year, over 200. Local domestic violence shelters began referring clients directly to the foundation, knowing the women would receive expert help at no cost. Meanwhile, Amber was released from prison after serving 4 years of her 7-year sentence. She tried to contact Naomi through social media, sending a long message about rehabilitation and making amends. Naomi read it once, then deleted it without responding. Amber had made her choices. She'd actively participated in Brandon's crimes, she'd worn Naomi's bathrobe while Naomi was getting burned by soup, she'd smugly kissed Brandon in full view while Naomi stood homeless on the sidewalk. Naomi didn't need or want Amber's apology. She'd moved far beyond caring what Amber thought or felt. Trevor had received 12 years and was still in prison. According to Patricia, who Naomi occasionally had lunch with, Trevor had found religion in prison and claimed to be a changed man. Naomi didn't care about that either. What she cared about was the growing network of consultants she'd trained, the women she helped every day, and the systemic changes her advocacy was creating. She testified before the state legislature about financial abuse, helping to pass new laws that made it easier for victims to freeze joint accounts and access their own funds during separation. She'd worked with banks to develop training programs for staff to recognize signs of financial coercion. She'd consulted on curriculum for law school clinics focusing on family law and economic justice. Brandon had tried to reduce her to nothing. Instead, he'd launched her into a career where she made real differences in people's lives every single day. On the 3-year anniversary of the soup incident, a date she marked privately but significantly, Naomi received an unexpected letter. It was from Brandon, forwarded through his prison's mail system. She almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. She opened the envelope and unfolded the single page inside. "Naomi," it began. "I know you have no reason to read this or care what I have to say. I know I destroyed your trust, your life, and any respect you might have had for me. I'm writing not because I expect forgiveness, I know I don't deserve that, but because I need you to know that I recognize what I did was wrong. Prison gives you a lot of time to think. I spent the past 3 years thinking about how I treated you, the choices I made, the person I became. I was arrogant. I thought I was smarter than everyone else, that I could get away with anything. I thought you were weak and would just accept whatever I did. I was wrong about all of that. You weren't weak. You were strong enough to fight back, smart enough to expose me, and principled enough to demand justice not just for yourself but for everyone I hurt. I heard about your business. Even in here, people talk about you. They've seen news articles, heard podcasts. You've become someone important, someone who helps people. I'm not saying this to butter you up or ask for anything. I'm saying it because you deserve to know that even the person who tried to destroy you can see how much you've accomplished. I'll be in prison for at least another 15 years. When I get out, I'll be middle-aged, unemployable, and marked as a felon for life. That's the consequence of my choices, and I accept it. You don't owe me anything, not forgiveness, not acknowledgement, nothing. I just wanted you to know that you won. Not because you put me in prison, but because you turned the worst thing that ever happened to you into something that helps other people. That strength I never had and never will have. I hope you never think about me again after this letter. I hope you continue building your business and helping people and living the life you deserve. And I'm genuinely sorry for every moment of pain I caused you. Brandon. Naomi read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and put it in her filing cabinet. Not because she forgave him or because his apology changed anything, but because it was proof. Proof that she'd won so completely that even her enemy acknowledged her victory. She didn't respond to the letter. Didn't need to. Brandon could spend the rest of his prison sentence thinking about what he'd lost and what she'd become. She had more important things to do. That week alone, her office helped 3 women uncover hidden assets totaling over $400,000. Her foundation provided free services to 7 women who were preparing to leave abusive relationships and needed financial documentation for their cases. Her training program certified 5 new consultants who would open their own practices in different states. And on Friday evening she had dinner with Simone and Rita and a few other close friends. Women who'd supported her, believed in her, and helped her build everything she'd accomplished. To Naomi, Simone said, raising her glass. Who turned the worst day of her life into a career helping others? To all of us, Naomi corrected. None of this would exist without support and sisterhood and women refusing to stay silent. They clinked glasses and drank, and Naomi looked around the table at these women who'd become her chosen family. Brandon had thrown her out thinking she'd have nowhere to go, no one to turn to, no way to fight back. He'd been wrong about everything. She had somewhere to go, forward, always forward. She had people to turn to, women who understood strength and resilience. And she had not just one way to fight back, but hundreds of them, refined through experience and shared through her business with women across the country. The soup had burned. The countdown had been cruel. The betrayal had been complete. But what had risen from those ashes was something Brandon could never have predicted and couldn't destroy even from prison. A woman who'd found her purpose in protecting others from the pain she'd survived. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. 5 years after the soup incident, Naomi's company had become a powerhouse. Patterson Financial Consulting operated in 12 states with 65 consultants. The Patterson Foundation had helped over 1,500 women escape financial abuse. Her book was now required reading at the FBI Academy for agents specializing in financial crimes. But success brought new challenges. Naomi sat in her corner office, a far cry from the small third-floor space she'd started in, reviewing a troubling pattern in recent cases. Rita, she called to her chief operations officer. Rita appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. What do you see in these files? Rita scanned the case summaries Naomi had flagged. Multiple victims, same geographic area, similar methods? You think it's organized? I think we're looking at a network, Naomi said. Not individual abusers acting independently, but a coordinated scheme. Look at these financial patterns, the same offshore banks, similar shell company structures, even overlapping attorney names. Rita's eyes widened. Should we contact the FBI? Already done. Agent Monroe is coming tomorrow. Naomi leaned back in her chair. 5 years ago I was focused on my own case, my own survival. Now we're identifying criminal networks. It's surreal. The meeting with Agent Monroe the next day confirmed Naomi's suspicions. The FBI had been tracking a group of men who targeted professional women, married them, systematically stole their assets through fraud and coercion, then disappeared before the women could pursue legal action. Your cases give us the pattern we needed to see, Agent Monroe said, spreading documents across Naomi's conference table. We estimate this network has defrauded at least 40 women out of a combined $20 million over the past decade. Naomi felt sick. 40 women. $20 million. What do you need from us? Everything you have. Every case file, every piece of financial documentation, every victim statement. We're building a RICO case, racketeering and organized fraud. This is big, Naomi. This could shut down an entire criminal operation. Patterson Financial Consulting became ground zero for the federal investigation. Naomi's team worked around the clock, organizing files, correlating data, identifying patterns. They discovered connections between cases they'd never realized were related. The investigation took 8 months. When the arrests finally happened, they made national headlines. FBI busts romance fraud ring, 20 men arrested in multi-state marriage scam. Naomi was interviewed on major news networks, explaining how the scheme worked and how her company had helped identify it. These predators target successful women, doctors, lawyers, executives, entrepreneurs, she told one interviewer. They use romance to gain trust, marriage to gain legal access to assets, and sophisticated financial fraud to steal everything. Then they disappear, leaving the women broke and ashamed to come forward. But you've helped change that, the interviewer said. Women are talking now, Naomi agreed. They're seeking help immediately instead of suffering in silence. They're documenting everything. They're fighting back. And organizations like mine are here to support them when they do. The publicity from the case brought even more attention to Patterson Financial Consulting. Within a year, Naomi was fielding requests to expand internationally. Women in Canada, the UK, and Australia wanted access to her services and training. She hired a business development team to explore international expansion. She partnered with law firms and advocacy organizations overseas. She created online training modules that could be accessed globally. By year 7, Patterson Financial Consulting was a multi-million-dollar business with operations in 3 countries. Naomi had been featured in Forbes, Time, and the Wall Street Journal. She'd spoken at the United Nations about economic violence against women. She'd consulted with lawmakers in multiple countries on legislation to combat financial abuse. She'd also started dating again, something she'd avoided for years while building her business. His name was James, and he was a family law attorney who specialized in representing abuse survivors. They'd met at a professional conference and discovered they shared similar values and goals. I admire what you've built, James told her over dinner one evening. You took the worst experience of your life and created something that helps thousands of people. That's remarkable. Naomi smiled. I didn't have a choice. Well, I did. I could have stayed angry and bitter and focused on Brandon. But that would have been giving him power over my future. I wanted to take back control, and helping others was how I did that. Do you ever think about him? James asked carefully. Honestly? No, not really. Naomi sipped her wine. He's irrelevant to my life now. He's in prison where he belongs, and I'm here building something meaningful. What he did to me was terrible, but it's not the defining moment of my life anymore. This business, this mission, that's who I am now. James reached across the table and took her hand. I'd like to get to know more of who you are. If you're interested. She was. For the first time since Brandon, she was ready to let someone in, to trust again. James had seen her at her strongest and most vulnerable. In courtrooms and conferences and late-night strategy sessions about difficult cases. He knew what she'd survived and what she'd built from those ashes. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully. Naomi had learned not to rush, not to ignore red flags, not to sacrifice herself for someone else's comfort. James respected her boundaries, supported her work, and never tried to diminish her success or independence. You know what I love about us? James said one evening as they walked through the city after a particularly satisfying day at work. We're both whole people. I don't need you to complete me, and you don't need me to validate you. We're just choosing to build something together because we enjoy each other's company. That's exactly what I needed to hear, Naomi admitted. After Brandon, I swore I'd never depend on someone else for my identity or security. You get that? I do. And I hope you know I'd never try to change that about you. James stopped walking and turned to face her. Your strength is one of the things I admire most. You're not looking for someone to save you because you already saved yourself. They were engaged within a year, but Naomi kept her last name. She'd built her reputation and business as Naomi Patterson, and she wasn't about to change that. James understood completely. His ego wasn't threatened by her success or independence. The wedding was small and private, attended by close friends and family. Simone was her maid of honor. Rita and her team of consultants were there. Agent Monroe came, representing the professional relationship that had grown into genuine friendship. Brandon wasn't mentioned, wasn't thought about, wasn't relevant. At the reception, Simone gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. 8 years ago, I watched my friend Naomi sit in a library, burned and homeless and heartbroken, trying to figure out how to survive. Today, I watched her marry a man who values her strength, surrounded by a business empire she built from nothing, celebrated by hundreds of women whose lives she's changed. If you ever doubt that revenge is a dish best served cold, Remember that Naomi's revenge was building a life so amazing that her enemy became irrelevant. That's the kind of revenge I can toast to. Everyone raised their glasses. Naomi looked around at the faces of people who'd supported her, worked with her, believed in her. This was her real family. These were the relationships that mattered. Later that night, as she and James prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Naomi checked her phone one last time. There was an email from one of her consultants. Just closed the Johnson case. Found $340,000 in hidden assets and documented systematic financial abuse. Client is filing for divorce with full evidence package. She wanted me to tell you thank you for training us to do this work. Naomi smiled and showed James the message. This is what it's all about. Every case we win, every woman we help, it matters. You matter, James corrected gently. The work is important, but don't forget to celebrate yourself too. Look what you've accomplished. She looked. From soup-soaked and homeless to CEO of a multinational consulting firm. From victim to expert witness to FBI consultant. From someone who'd been told she had 10 minutes to leave to someone who'd built an empire that would last decades. Brandon had 19 years left on his sentence. He would get out as an elderly man with no prospects, no reputation, no future. Naomi was 36 years old with a thriving business, a loving marriage, and a legacy that would help women long after she was gone. She knew which life she preferred. And she knew that every moment of pain, every challenge overcome, every victory won had been worth it to get here. The best revenge wasn't destruction. It was construction. Building something so valuable that your enemy's attempts to hurt you became nothing more than fuel for your success. 10 years after the soup incident, Naomi stood in the lobby of a glass tower in downtown Los Angeles, waiting for the elevator to take her to the penthouse suite. Patterson Financial Consulting now occupied the entire top floor of the building, a far cry from that small third-floor office she'd started in a decade ago. The company employed 230 people across 15 countries. The Patterson Foundation had helped over 10,000 women. Her second book, Financial Freedom After Betrayal, had been translated into 23 languages. She consulted regularly with the FBI, Interpol, and various governments on financial crimes legislation. But today was special. Today was the official 10th anniversary celebration of Patterson Financial Consulting, and everyone who'd been part of the journey was gathering to mark the occasion. The elevator doors opened to reveal a space transformed for the event. Banners hung from the ceiling displaying statistics. 10 years. 10,000 plus women helped. $287 million in recovered assets. Photos lined the walls showing consultants with grateful clients, training sessions, expansion openings, advocacy events. Rita rushed over, wearing an elegant blue dress and a huge smile. There you are. The caterers need approval on the dessert setup, and the videographer has questions about the timeline. Naomi handled the details smoothly, years of running a complex organization having honed her management skills. She checked on the team preparing to give presentations about various divisions of the company. She greeted major donors to the foundation. She posed for photos with consultants who'd flown in from international offices. James arrived with their 2-year-old daughter, Hope. Naomi had chosen the name deliberately, a reminder that even from the darkest circumstances, hope could emerge and flourish. Mama? Hope reached for her with chubby hands. Naomi scooped her up, breathing in the sweet smell of her daughter's hair. This child represented everything Brandon had tried to take from her: security, family, a future built on love rather than lies. Agent Monroe approached with someone Naomi didn't recognize, a young woman in her mid-20s with nervous eyes. Naomi, this is Christina, Agent Monroe said. She reached out after seeing your interview last month. She's been documenting financial abuse from her partner for 6 months now, and she's ready to leave. Naomi shifted Hope to one hip and extended her free hand to Christina. It takes tremendous courage to reach out for help. I'm glad you did. Christina's eyes filled with tears. I heard your story about the soup and the 10 minutes, and I realized I didn't have to wait for things to get that bad. I could leave before it escalated. Your example gave me permission to protect myself. This was what the work meant. Not just recovering assets or prosecuting criminals, but giving women permission to value themselves, to demand better, to refuse to accept abuse as normal. You're going to be okay, Naomi told Christina. Better than okay. You're going to be free. And we're going to make sure you have the resources to rebuild safely. She connected Christina with Rita, who would personally handle her case and ensure she got the best support the company could provide. The anniversary celebration officially began with a video montage showing the company's growth over 10 years. There was footage of Naomi's first television interview, looking nervous but determined. Photos from the opening of each new office. Clips of consultants celebrating victories. Testimonials from women whose lives had been changed. When it was Naomi's turn to speak, she walked to the podium with hope still in her arms. The room fell silent as 200 people waited to hear what she'd say. 10 years ago today, I signed the lease on a small office space with borrowed furniture and big dreams. I'd been out of my marriage for 2 years. I'd testified at my ex-husband's criminal trial. I'd received my divorce settlement. And I'd decided that I wasn't going to let what happened to me be the end of my story. It was going to be the beginning. I didn't know if anyone would hire me. I didn't know if my approach would work. I just knew that I'd survived something terrible and learned things in the process that could help other women. So I put up a sign and hoped someone would walk through the door. What I didn't anticipate was how many of you would walk through that door. How many women were desperate for help, how many families were being torn apart by financial abuse, how much work there was to do. I didn't anticipate that this small consulting practice would become a movement. Because that's what this is. It's not just a business, it's a statement that financial abuse is unacceptable, that women deserve protection and justice, that no one should have to navigate divorce and betrayal alone. Every single person in this room has contributed to making that statement real. Our consultants who work late documenting complex fraud schemes. Our foundation staff who provide free services to women who can't afford to pay. Our donors who fund that work. Our legal partners who take on tough cases. Our technology team who build systems that make our work more efficient and effective. We've helped over 10,000 women in the past decade. We've recovered nearly $300 million in stolen or hidden assets. We've contributed to the prosecution of hundreds of abusers and fraudsters. But more than that, we've created a model that proves financial empowerment is possible even after the worst betrayal. I started this company as revenge against one man who tried to destroy me. But it became something much bigger, a way to ensure that men like him can't hurt women the way he hurt me. And that, I've learned, is the best revenge of all. Not hurting your enemy but protecting others from becoming victims of people like them. So thank you. Thank you for joining me in this mission. Thank you for believing that women deserve better. And thank you for being part of a company that doesn't just talk about change, we create it, one case at a time. Here's to the next 10 years. Here's to even more women helped, even more justice served, even more lives transformed. And here's to remembering that our lowest moments don't define us, what we build from them does. The room erupted in applause. Hope clapped her tiny hands too, not understanding but caught up in the emotion of the moment. Later, as the party continued and people mingled, Simone pulled Naomi aside to a quiet corner. Do you remember that first night? Simone asked. In the library when you looked like someone had torn your whole world apart. I remember, Naomi said softly. I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything. Instead, you found everything. Simone gestured at the celebration around them. This empire, this impact, this life. Brandon tried to reduce you to nothing, and you responded by becoming someone extraordinary. Naomi thought about that. You know what's strange? I think I needed it to happen. Not the abuse, that was inexcusable and I'd never wish it on anyone. But the wake-up call. The realization that I'd been playing small, making myself smaller to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. Brandon's betrayal forced me to ask what I really wanted from life. And what did you want? To matter. To do work that helped people. To build something lasting. Naomi looked down at Hope, sleeping peacefully in her arms now. To create a family based on honesty and respect. To never again depend on someone else for my identity or security. I wanted to be someone I could respect when I looked in the mirror. Mission accomplished, Simone said, clinking her champagne glass against Naomi's water glass. The celebration wound down around midnight. As staff cleaned up and guests departed, Naomi stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city lights. James came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her in hope. What are you thinking about? He asked. Closure, she said. Brandon gets out of prison in 9 years. He'll be 51 years old, unemployable, broke. His life is effectively over. And yours is just hitting its stride, James observed. Exactly. I spent years being angry at him, then years being focused on building something despite him. But standing here now, I realize I'm finally past him completely. He's just a story I tell sometimes, a chapter in my history that led to everything else. He's not my enemy anymore. He's not anything to me. That's real closure, James said. Not forgiveness necessarily, but true indifference. He can't hurt you anymore because you've moved so far beyond where he tried to leave you. Naomi nodded. She thought about the woman who'd sat at her kitchen table expecting a normal Tuesday dinner. That woman was gone, transformed by fire and soup into someone harder, smarter, more determined. She thought about the first terrifying night in Simone's guest room, wondering how she'd survive. She thought about discovering Brandon's crimes, about testifying in court, about starting her business with almost nothing. Every challenge had taught her something. Every victory had made her stronger. Every woman she'd helped had reinforced her purpose. Her phone buzzed. A text from one of her international consultants. Just finished training session in Sydney. 30 new consultants certified. The work continues. The work continues. That was the point, wasn't it? It wasn't about Brandon anymore, wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about the work itself, about the women who still needed help, about building systems that would outlast her own involvement. Come on, James said gently. Let's go home. Hope needs her bed and you need sleep. Tomorrow you're speaking at that conference in San Francisco, remember? Naomi smiled. Another day, another opportunity to tell women they don't have to accept abuse. As they drove home through quiet streets, Hope asleep in her car seat, Naomi reflected on the journey. From soup victim to CEO. From homeless and terrified to secure and strong. From someone who'd been told she had 10 minutes to leave to someone who'd built something that would last decades. If she could go back and tell that woman in the library, burned, broken, scared, one thing, what would it be? It gets better, she would say. So much better than you can imagine. The pain is real and valid, but it's not the end. It's the beginning of something amazing. Hold on. Fight back. Build something. The best revenge is becoming someone he never imagined you could be. That night, Naomi had a dream. She was standing at her old kitchen table, but this time when Brandon lifted the soup pot, she calmly stood up and walked out before he could pour it. She walked out the door, down the street, into the office building where Patterson Financial Consulting was headquartered. In the dream, the office was full of women, consultants, clients, advocates, survivors. They were all working together, sharing stories, solving problems, building something bigger than any individual. Brandon appeared at the door with his soup pot, but no one paid attention to him. He'd become invisible, powerless, irrelevant. The women were too busy helping each other to notice or care about his presence. Naomi woke with a start, then smiled in the darkness. Even in her dreams, Brandon had lost his power over her. He was nothing more than a ghost of a painful past, while she was surrounded by a community of strong women building a better future. That was the truest revenge of all, not just surviving what he'd done, but thriving so completely that he became nothing more than a footnote in a much larger, more important story. A story about justice, about empowerment, about women refusing to be broken by betrayal. A story that was still being written, one case at a time, one woman helped at a time, one victory at a time. And Naomi was going to keep writing that story for the rest of her life.